Congress didn't just file paperwork, they just lit the fuse on the biggest political meltdown in modern history. Right now, Washington is in full-blown chaos as over 100 lawmakers demand that Donald Trump step down immediately after impeachment papers dropped that accuse him of everything from power abuses to constitutional betrayal. They're saying the presidency itself is collapsing under the weight of hidden truth, secret cover-ups, and a pattern of conduct they claim threatens American democracy. And here's the part nobody is ready for. They're not bluffing. They want him out now because something just got exposed, and it changes everything.
Inaugurate.
Donald Trump is a living, breathing, impeachable offense.
Donald Trump is facing an impeachment trial again. No president has ever been impeached twice, and no president has ever gone on trial after leaving office. It's fair to say we're in pretty uncharted territory. So what's the case against him? Donald Trump is accused of inciting violence against the government. Specifically this, the storming of Congress by thousands of his supporters. But his accusers say you have to go back a couple of months to last November's presidential election.
We know there was massive fraud.
That was a rigged election.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win.
Trump lost, but refused to admit it. Not only that, but when the state of Georgia was getting ready to hold a second round of voting to settle two very close Senate races, Mr. Trump is accused of trying to intervene illegally.
I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
It all came to a head on January the 6th, when Congress was due to confirm the results of the presidential election. In a long, bitter speech, Mr. Trump railed against the entire election process.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Within minutes of him finishing, some of his supporters were breaking into the Capitol building. But did the president actually incite violence? America's First Amendment, which protects freedom of speech.
You don't get to burn down the rules of the game and then demand to keep playing. That's the basic question in Washington right now. Does the Constitution still have any real force? Or is Donald Trump effectively above the law because enough people in power are scared to confront him? Congress isn't just muttering about concerns anymore. They've put fresh impeachment papers on the table, and a growing block of lawmakers is openly saying it. Trump should step down or be removed for attacking the foundations of American democracy. Let's pull this out of the chaos and say clearly what's going on. This isn't about one speech or one bad tweet. This is about a years-long pattern where the president has treated the Constitution like a nuisance and democratic institutions like tools for personal power. That's why you're seeing phrases like living, breathing, impeachable offense and tyranny coming from the mouths of people who work in the same building he's supposed to respect. They're not just being dramatic. They're trying to describe a presidency that's been off the rails from day one.
Gives Mr. Trump lots of leeway to say pretty much whatever he wants, short of ordering his supporters to storm the Capitol, which he did not do.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
It'll be up to the Senate's 100 members to decide if Mr. Trump is guilty or not, and the Democrats will need at least 17 Republicans to join them to get a conviction. It's a really tall order. Most Republicans think the trial shouldn't even be happening.
This proceeding we are about to enter is unconstitutional.
But what if it does go against him? Well, then Donald Trump will be the first president to be impeached and convicted. He'd almost certainly be barred from ever running for public office again. And he could lose his presidential pension and perks. But what if he wins? The Democrats could still try and find some other way to punish the former president, but to survive impeachment twice in a year would, in the eyes of Mr. Trump's loyal base, represent another victory against an establishment that's just out to get him. A useful platform, perhaps, on which to launch another presidential.
To understand why these new impeachment resolutions exist, you have to go back to the story we all lived through. Trump lost the 2020 election. He knew he lost. The people around him knew he lost. Dozens of courts, including judges he appointed, threw out his claims of fraud. State officials certified results. The system worked the way it's supposed to. Instead of accepting that, Trump doubled down on a lie, that the election was rigged, that there was massive fraud, that only legal votes counted. He didn't say it once in anger and move on. He made it the entire basis of his political identity. That lie wasn't harmless. It was the gasoline poured over every extremist message board and conspiracy video in the country. When he told supporters to come to Washington on January 6th, when he talked about fighting like hell, that didn't happen in a vacuum. It landed on weeks of nonstop disinformation about a stolen election. It landed on people who already believed democracy had been hijacked. It landed on the same folks he'd been flattering for years as the real America, and we saw the result when they smashed their way into the Capitol, hunting for lawmakers and trying to stop the transfer of power. And it wasn't just the speech on January 6th. Think about the Georgia phone call. A sitting president, desperate to cling to office, calling a state official and asking him to find exactly the number of votes Trump needed to win. That isn't a misunderstanding. That isn't some innocent attempt to clarify results. That's pressure. That's power being used to bend the outcome of an election. When you put that call next to the months of lies, next to the mob at the Capitol, you're looking at a picture of a president willing to break the system rather than accept a peaceful loss. Now drop that history next to this new impeachment resolution, H.Res. 353. It doesn't just say Trump did a bad thing. It lays out 7 separate articles of impeachment, 7 different ways Congress is saying he violated his oath of office and abused his power. The first is obstruction of justice. We've heard that phrase for years, but here's what it means in this context. Instead of letting law enforcement and prosecutors do their jobs, the president is accused of leaning on them, firing people, dangling pardons, and using the bully pulpit to intimidate anyone who might hold him accountable. The reason that matters is simple. The justice system is supposed to be blind. It isn't supposed to change its standards depending on who's sitting in the Oval Office. When a president intervenes in investigations about himself or his allies, when he attacks prosecutors for doing their jobs, he sends a message. A law is flexible for people in my circle. That's how you slide from a republic where the rules apply to everyone into a system where power decides what's legal. Obstruction of justice isn't a technical issue. It's a direct attack on the idea that nobody is above the law. The second article is about spending. The Constitution gives Congress the power of the purse. They debate, they vote, they pass laws about how federal money should be used. The president's job is to carry those laws out. But Trump has repeatedly treated that power as optional. We've watched him sit on congressionally approved funds, drag his feet on aid, and try to redirect money to his own political priorities. When a court orders the administration to release funds and the White House simply refuses, that isn't a policy dispute. That's a president trying to overwrite Congress with sheer stubbornness. Think about the danger baked into that behavior. If any president can decide which laws they feel like enforcing and which spending decisions they feel like honoring, then Congress might as well pack up and go home. There's no point in having elected representatives fight over budgets if the person in the White House can simply say, "I don't care what you passed. I'm doing something else." This article is Congress saying, no, we're not going to accept being turned into an advisory committee. The third article looks at trade and economic power. Trump loves to talk about tariffs and tough deals, but behind the slogans is a pattern where he used emergency powers and trade authorities in ways a lot of legal experts say stretch or break what the law was meant to allow. Tariffs slapped on allies without clear justification. National emergency declarations that look more like political stunts than genuine crises. When you abuse those tools, you're not just changing numbers on a spreadsheet. You're playing with people's jobs, prices, and livelihoods based on personal political needs rather than clear legal limits. Then you hit the First Amendment. This is where the impeachment resolution really slices into the heart of what's supposed to make America different. The government is not allowed to punish people for criticizing it, period. Yet we've seen Trump attack media outlets and then watch as the regulatory machinery comes knocking. We've seen law firms and private citizens singled out and targeted after crossing him. When the president uses the power of the state, or even just the threat of it, to silence critics, that's not tough talk. That's an attack on free speech. And let's be honest, this isn't some side storyline. It's central to the whole project. Authoritarian movements always go after independent institutions, the press, the courts, universities, anyone who might tell the public an inconvenient truth. If you let a president turn those institutions into enemies to be crushed, instead of watchdogs to be tolerated, you're letting the democratic immune system be dismantled from within. Another article focuses on creating unlawful offices within the government. That sounds bureaucratic, but it's actually pretty straightforward. Congress decides what agencies exist and how they're structured. The president appoints people to run them. What Trump is accused of doing is inventing roles and entities that dodge those rules, giving loyalists power without the usual oversight, building parallel structures that answer only to him. That's how you hide decisions from Congress. That's how you move more and more governance into the shadows, where it's harder for the public to see what's being done in their name. Then there's bribery and corruption. The Constitution literally lists bribery as a reason to impeach. The concern here isn't some single envelope of cash in a parking garage. It's a pattern. Foreign governments and special interests pouring money into Trump properties, events moved to Trump businesses, policy decisions that just happen to line up with who's paying the tab. You don't need a confession to see the conflict of interest. When the president profits personally from government business, it's impossible to know where public duty ends and private gain begins. Finally, there's the big one, tyranny. That word is heavy, and Congress knows it. They're using it to capture the total picture. The obstruction, the spending abuses, the war powers overreach, the attacks on free speech, the shadow offices, the corruption. Taken together, they point to a president who doesn't accept that he's supposed to be constrained by other branches. Someone who sees checks and balances as flaws in the system instead of its core strength. That's the behavior the founders wrote impeachment for. Not for partisan disagreements, but for leaders who try to turn a limited office into a personal throne. Now layer on Representative Al Green's separate resolution about war powers. The Constitution gives Congress the authority to declare war. Over the decades, presidents from both parties have stretched that, but Trump took it even further, ordering high-risk military actions without meaningful congressional approval and daring anyone to stop him. Green's impeachment article is a warning. If Congress doesn't draw a line here, then future presidents will feel completely free to use lethal force abroad whenever it suits them politically, with no real oversight. It's important to say this plainly. None of this is cost-free. Every time Congress looks away, every time leadership decides it's not the right moment to confront the president, they're sending a message. They're saying these abuses are survivable, they're tolerable, and if they're tolerable once, they'll be repeated. That's how broken behavior becomes the new baseline. What was unthinkable under one president becomes just controversial under the next. And eventually, it's treated as normal. At the same time, there is real fear on Capitol Hill. Some Democrats worry that pushing impeachment again will energize Trump's base, or drown out their own agenda, or get spun by right-wing media as persecution. A lot of Republicans know exactly how bad his conduct is, but are terrified of his voters and his media machine. So you end up with this twisted dynamic where everyone sees the train wreck. Fewer people are willing to say it out loud, and even fewer are willing to act. And that's where the lawmakers demanding resignation or removal come in. They're not pretending this is easy. They're not blind to the political risks. They're just saying that at some point, the obligation to defend the constitutional order has to matter more than short-term poll numbers. That's why you hear them talk about Trump as a threat to the Constitution, rather than just a bad leader. They're trying to remind the country that this is bigger than one man, bigger than one election, bigger than one party. So what does all of this mean for you? It means that the fight over impeachment papers and resignation calls isn't some abstract institutional drama. It's a question about the rules that will govern every future president, no matter who you vote for. If Congress shows that a determined president can defy courts, twist war powers, treat public money like personal leverage, punish critics, and shrug off impeachment, then the presidency becomes a different office. It becomes more dangerous, less accountable, and further removed from ordinary people. You don't have to agree with every article in HRes 353 to see the pattern. You don't have to like every member calling for removal to see that something fundamental is being tested. The president took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. The case being made now is that he's done the opposite, attacked, undermined, and eroded it whenever it got in his way. If that doesn't trigger a serious response from Congress, then the oath might as well be ceremonial. Here's the hard truth. This story might not end in a dramatic Senate conviction or a resignation speech from the Oval Office. It might end in something quieter, another acquittal, another round of excuses, another set of lines in the history books about a Congress that knew better and didn't act forcefully enough. But even if that's how it plays out, the record will be there. The impeachment papers will be there. The speeches will be there. Future generations will be able to see who stood up and who ducked. And for the rest of us, the lesson is just as stark. Democracies don't crumble all at once. They erode when people get used to the idea that power doesn't answer to anything. That's what this moment is about. Not just whether Donald Trump spends the next few years in office or out of it, but whether the system that outlasts him is stronger or weaker because of what we chose to tolerate. So when you hear that Congress is demanding Trump step down after impeachment papers drop, strip away the noise and hear the real question underneath. Are we still a country where the law limits the president? Or are we becoming a country where the president limits the law? The answer won't come from a single speech or a single vote. It'll come from whether enough people in power are willing to risk their careers, their comfort, and their political futures to say, no, this is where we draw the line.